If you're between 75 and 85 and you're still doing the 6 things we're about to walk through, researchers who study aging would say something interesting is happening in your body, something that goes against what most people assume happens automatically after 75. Most people think that once you cross into your late 70s and 80s, decline is just the default setting, that everything slows down and there's nothing to be done about it. But a growing body of published research on aging suggests that's not quite the full picture. There's a smaller group of older adults whose bodies and minds seem to be aging on a different curve altogether. And the 6 patterns we'll cover today keep showing up again and again in the research on this group. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what those 6 things are, the simple biology behind why they matter, and, more importantly, which ones you can still start today, no matter your age right now. Before we get into it, a quick note. Everything in this video is based on published research and general scientific understanding of aging, not on any single individual's medical file, and it's meant purely as educational information, not medical advice. If anything here makes you curious about your own health, the right next step is always a conversation with your own doctor who knows your history and your body far better than any video ever could. Now let's set up a few ideas we'll keep coming back to because they'll make everything else click into place. The first is something scientists call physiological reserve. Think of it as the buffer or cushion your body keeps in the tank for handling stress, illness, or injury. Everyone loses some reserve with age, but how much and how fast varies enormously from person to person, and lifestyle plays a bigger role in that than most people realize. The second concept is inflammaging, a term researchers use to describe the low-grade, chronic inflammation that tends to creep up as we age, quietly influencing everything from joint stiffness to heart health to memory. And the third is functional age versus chronological age, the idea that the number of candles on your cake and how your body actually performs can be 2 very different things. Keep these 3 ideas in your back pocket because every single point we cover today ties back to one or more of them. Let's start with the first thing that shows up again and again among people who seem to be aging remarkably well in their late 70s and 80s. They keep moving, and not necessarily in the way you'd expect. The common belief is that once you're older, rest is safest, that pushing the body is risky, and the wise move is to slow down and conserve energy. The reality that research points to is almost the opposite. Muscle tissue is metabolically active and demanding. When it isn't used, the body treats it as unnecessary and begins breaking it down faster, a process researchers call sarcopenia. This isn't just about looking frail. Reduced muscle mass is linked to weaker balance, slower recovery from illness, and lower physiological reserve, that buffer we just talked about. Research published in gerontology and sports medicine journals has repeatedly found that older adults who engage in regular, moderate resistance style movement, think chair exercises, light weights resistance bands, or simply consistent walking with some effort involved, tend to preserve more muscle and functional strength than peers who remain largely sedentary. Picture a composite example, not a real person. Imagine 2 neighbors, both in their early 80s, who used to walk together every morning. One kept it up, gradually adding light stretching and simple strength movements at home. The other stopped after a minor health scare, worried that activity might be risky. Over a couple of years, the one who kept moving reported easier grocery trips, steadier balance, and fewer falls, while the other noticed the opposite, not because of some dramatic single event, but because of the slow, quiet effect of reduced movement. The practical fix here isn't about becoming an athlete. It's about consistency over intensity. A short daily walk, some gentle resistance work, or even standing up and sitting down from a chair repeatedly counts as meaningful movement your muscles register. And a bonus insight worth remembering, movement doesn't have to be formal exercise to count. Gardening, carrying groceries, and taking the stairs when safe to do so all send the same signal to your muscles and joints that we're still needed here. The second thing that stands out in people who are aging exceptionally well is something a little less obvious. They tend to maintain strong, active social connections. The common assumption is that social life naturally shrinks with age. Friends move away, spouses pass, and isolation becomes almost inevitable. But researchers studying longevity have found that the people who maintain regular social contact, whether through family, community groups, religious organizations, or even simple weekly routines like a phone call or a shared meal, tend to show better markers of cognitive health over time. The mechanism here connects back to inflammaging. Chronic loneliness has been associated in published research with elevated markers of stress and inflammation in the body, while regular, positive social interaction appears to have something of a buffering effect. Consider a composite illustration. Think of a woman in her late 70s who joined a weekly community card game, not because she was especially social by nature, but because a friend invited her. Over time, that one recurring commitment gave her a reason to get dressed, get out, and engage her mind in conversation and light problem solving, all of which researchers associate with better cognitive resilience. The practical fix is refreshingly simple. It doesn't require a wide social circle, just consistency. One recurring connection, whether it's a weekly call, a regular walk with a neighbor, or a standing coffee date, appears to matter more than the total number of people in your life. And here's a bonus thought worth sitting with. Even brief daily interactions like chatting with a shopkeeper or a mail carrier seem to contribute positively to a sense of connection, according to some behavioral research on aging and well-being. If you're finding this useful so far, this is a good moment to hit subscribe, because we're covering health and longevity topics like this regularly, and you won't want to miss the ones still coming. The third pattern worth understanding involves something people often get backwards: sleep. The common belief is that older adults simply need less sleep, and that waking up frequently through the night or sleeping only a few hours is just a normal, unavoidable part of aging. Sleep researchers push back on this. What actually changes with age is sleep architecture. The proportion of deep versus light sleep shifts, and older adults may spend less time in deep restorative sleep stages. But the total need for quality rest doesn't disappear. If anything, sleep continues to play a critical role in memory consolidation, immune function, and even the brain's overnight cleanup process, where researchers believe waste byproducts are cleared from brain tissue during deep sleep. People in their late 70s and 80s who report better cognitive sharpness and steadier mood often describe protecting their sleep environment deliberately. Consistent bedtimes, limiting screens before bed, and keeping bedrooms cool and dark. Picture as an illustrative composite a retired teacher who used to fall asleep with the television on and woke up groggy most mornings. After adjusting his routine, dimming lights an hour before bed, keeping a consistent wake time, and cutting back on late caffeine, he noticed within a few weeks that he felt mentally sharper during the day, a pattern consistent with what sleep researchers would predict. Even though this is a general illustration rather than a documented case, the practical fix is to treat sleep as an active health behavior rather than a passive event. Building a wind-down routine matters more than chasing a specific number of hours. As a bonus tip, exposure to natural daylight earlier in the day has been associated in some studies with more stable nighttime sleep patterns. So, a short morning walk outside may do double duty for both movement and rest quality. The fourth thing worth highlighting is how these individuals tend to relate to food, and it's more nuanced than simply eating healthy. The common belief is that appetite naturally fades with age, and that eating less is simply part of getting older, sometimes even seen as harmless. But researchers studying nutrition in aging populations have raised concerns about unintentional undereating, particularly around protein intake, which becomes increasingly important as the body's ability to build and maintain muscle becomes less efficient with age. The mechanism ties back directly to that first concept we introduced: physiological reserve. Insufficient protein and micronutrient intake can accelerate muscle loss, and weaken immune resilience, creating a compounding effect where lower energy leads to less movement, which leads to further muscle loss. Published nutrition research has often pointed to diets emphasizing vegetables, fruits, whole grains, healthy fats, and adequate protein sources, sometimes broadly described in terms similar to Mediterranean-style eating patterns, as associated with better markers of healthy aging, including cardiovascular and cognitive measures. As a composite illustration, imagine a man in his early 80s who, after his wife passed, found cooking for one uninspiring and began skipping meals or relying on simple carbohydrate-heavy snacks. After a family member helped him build simple, protein-inclusive meal habits, eggs at breakfast, beans or fish incorporated regularly, and colorful vegetables at most meals, he reported feeling steadier in energy throughout the day. The practical fix isn't a rigid diet plan, but rather intentional attention to protein and variety at each meal and staying hydrated, since thirst signals can become less reliable with age. A bonus tip here: eating meals at consistent times, even alone, appears in some behavioral research to support better appetite regulation than irregular, skipped, or rushed eating patterns. The fifth pattern is one people rarely think of as a health behavior at all: staying mentally and creatively engaged through ongoing learning. The common belief is that cognitive decline is a fixed, linear inevitability, that the brain simply gets worse each year, full stop. But research in cognitive aging has increasingly supported the idea of cognitive reserve, a concept closely related to the physiological reserve we discussed earlier, where the brain builds resilience through continued mental challenge, much like a muscle. This doesn't mean brain games are a magic cure, but published research does suggest that ongoing novel learning, a new skill, language instrument, or even unfamiliar routes and puzzles is associated with maintained cognitive flexibility in some older populations. Picture a composite example: a retired accountant in her late 70s who decided to learn to paint watercolors purely for enjoyment, with no prior artistic background. The learning process required her to problem solve, plan, and use fine motor coordination in new ways. Over time, she and her family noticed she seemed mentally quicker in conversation and better at multitasking daily errands, an outcome broadly consistent with what cognitive reserve research would predict, though again, this is illustrative rather than a documented clinical case. The practical fix is to intentionally introduce novelty, rather than only repeating familiar, comfortable mental tasks. Trying a new recipe, a new route to the store, or picking up an instrument or language, even briefly, seems to matter more than repetitive puzzles alone. A bonus tip worth remembering: combining physical and mental challenge simultaneously, such as dancing, which requires memory coordination and rhythm together, has been highlighted in some studies as particularly beneficial for cognitive health in older adults. Before we get to the sixth and final pattern, if this video is giving you something useful to think about, maybe even something you want to try this week, drop a comment and let us know which of these 6 resonated with you most, or if there's a habit you've kept for years that you think has helped you. Conversations like that genuinely help others watching find encouragement too. The sixth and final thing that shows up repeatedly in people aging exceptionally well between 75 and 85 is perhaps the most overlooked. They continue to have a sense of purpose or role, something to get up for beyond simply managing health conditions. The common belief is that retirement and older age naturally means stepping back from responsibility and purpose entirely. But longevity researchers studying communities where people commonly live active lives into very old age have repeatedly pointed to a sense of purpose as one of the more consistently observed factors, sometimes described using a term similar to reason for being, associated with better long-term health outcomes. The mechanism likely runs through several pathways at once. Purpose tends to encourage more movement, more social interaction, better stress regulation, and even more consistent sleep and eating routines, effectively tying together everything we've discussed so far. Consider a composite illustration: a retired carpenter in his early 80s who began volunteering a few hours a week teaching basic woodworking safety to teenagers at a local community center. The role gave him a reason to plan his week, stay physically capable enough to demonstrate techniques, and stay socially engaged with people far younger than himself. He often said the volunteering gave him more energy than it took from him, an experience that aligns with what purpose-related research in aging populations has generally found, even though it's offered here as an illustrative pattern rather than a specific documented case. The practical fix doesn't require a formal volunteer role. It can be as simple as being the family member others rely on for a specific task, tending a garden others depend on, or mentoring someone informally. A bonus tip: purpose doesn't have to be grand or public. Private, personally meaningful goals like finishing a family history project or maintaining a specific tradition appear to provide similar psychological benefits in the research on this topic. So to bring it all together, the 6 patterns that show up again and again among people thriving in their late 70s and 80s involve staying physically active in ways that preserve muscle and functional strength, maintaining consistent and meaningful social connection, protecting sleep quality rather than assuming less is normal, eating with intention around protein and nutrient variety rather than passively letting appetite decline, continuing to challenge the brain with genuinely new learning rather than only familiar routines, and holding on to some form of ongoing purpose that gives structure and motivation to daily life. None of these are about chasing perfection, and none of them require dramatic lifestyle overhauls overnight. The research consistently points towards small, consistent behaviors compounding over years, not occasional extreme efforts. If there's one thing worth carrying away from all of this, it's a sense of encouragement rather than pressure. Aging well in your 70s and 80s, according to the pattern of research we've walked through today, doesn't appear to be about rare genetics or extraordinary willpower. It seems to be about ordinary, repeatable choices, many of which are still fully within reach, no matter where you're starting from today. Whether you're watching this for yourself or for a parent, grandparent, or someone you care about, the message from this body of research is quietly hopeful. It's rarely too late to begin building even one of these 6 habits, and every small step likely counts for more than we tend to give it credit for. Before you go, we'd love to know, which of these 6 do you already do consistently, and which one are you thinking about starting this week? Share this video with someone in your life who might need a little encouragement today. And if you found this valuable, subscribing helps us keep bringing you clear, research-based videos on healthy aging. As always, please remember, this video is educational information based on general published research, not personalized medical advice. And any changes to your exercise, nutrition, sleep, or health routines should be discussed with your own doctor first, especially if you have existing health conditions. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. We've got more videos coming soon on the science of healthy aging, and we'd genuinely love for you to be here for the next one.